3, 2, 1.
This is Chargers Unleashed podcast. Here are your hosts, Dan Wolfenstein and Jake Hefner. Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolfenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by UFC Fit in Temecula, Golden Road Brewery, Charger Bolt Family, Tick Pick, and Bet Online. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you choose to digest your weekly NFL podcast. Dan Wolfenstein, we've had a good week.
It's been a good week.
It's been a very good week, as a matter of fact, here on Chargers Unleashed podcast. For those of you who missed it, please go back and find it. But our newest first-round pick, Zion Johnson, joined the show on Wednesday. Spectacular interview if you have not heard it already. And Dan Wolfenstein and I were talking a little bit offline, and we thought, you know what? We're literally just having a Chargers discussion, but we're like, wait a minute. Why are we not talking about this on the pod? So what we're going to be talking about here is kind of just, let's take a look at the big perspective of things. We're early into the 2022 offseason right now before mini camp and training camp obviously picks up. But where are we sitting now following the 2021 season, following free agency, following the NFL draft? Let's just take a look at how much things have changed for the Los Angeles Chargers in the last 2 years. So I know I'm hyped about this because it's great to gain a little bit of perspective. I know Dan's hyped up about this, so this should be an interesting conversation. That's for sure.
Yes, Jake Hefner, how are you, my friend? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I am doing the best I can.
We're getting through.
We're
with you the whole time, and for what it's worth, we LAFB Chargers fans appreciate you, and we're here for you anytime you need.
Thank you.
All right, Jake. So we talk about perspective a lot on this show, and I generally would be the optimist, and you generally would be the pessimist. And it's becoming close to the point where it's hard not to be optimistic, even for you.
Bite your tongue. You better not go that far.
Okay, fair enough. Given what we've seen with this team. Now, there are people that can say, look, they haven't made the playoffs, Tom Telesco, Dean Spanos, whatever. And the goal of this episode is just to provide some perspective on just how much this team, this culture, the staff, the identity, you name it, how much has actually changed in a few short years. And so we're going to be kind of taking a step back, looking at what's happened. And if we've seen this before, Jake, before we get into all of that and to kind of start off the discussion, Bet Online, let's pay the bills.
Yes, of course, let's pay the bills. Our partners at Bet Online continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information. Find all of the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA playoffs, on the Major League Baseball, on the UFC fight, big UFC fight coming up this weekend, if you guys are not aware of that. And don't forget that the MLB, of course, is back, or I mentioned that already, apologize. But put in your bets now on who you're going to feel is going to win the World Series in the NBA playoffs. Make sure to do it through Bet Online. It's your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, including live betting and betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started. So head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BLEAV. That's BLEAV, believe, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts.
So the Chargers get Kyle Van Noy, breaking news. Another edge rusher, possibly linebacker depth, two-time Super Bowl champion. Great signing. And it's just another signing that we saw with the Chargers. And Jake and I, he mentioned at the top, we were kind of talking about this offline. We have not seen this much, let's call it action or change, in one offseason, let alone 2+, since being a fan / covering this team. And we kind of want to just take a step back and go kind of down memory lane of like where this team was. Like, Jake, do you remember I distinctly remember. So, Jake, just a few short years ago, like 2 years ago, 2020 season, Chargers, Anthony Lynn, the head coach, Chargers are 3-9. Team is doing terribly, other than the fact we have a rookie phenom. And Chargers are possibly going to have, at that point, the number 1 overall pick. And then what happens? Chargers go on a 4-game winning streak to end the season. Everyone's freaking out, wondering if Anthony Lynn's going to stay. What are we going to do to the coaching staff? Is this going to screw up our draft capital? Blah, 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 blah.
Sounds like you just rattled off everything that I was saying.
Yep. And fair enough. And it's easy to forget, like, where this team was. Like, we're going to go back before all of the Justin Herbert stuff. But, like, you think about it. From going from a Phillip Rivers to a Justin Herbert, which there was a big gap there of unknown. What the hell are we going to do as a team? You got, like, re-signing of key players. Now you got new coaching staff. You got new culture and identity. You rebuilt your entire offensive line. You changed the kind of in-game improvements that your team has. You completely shift the identity of your team. You go through a complete overhaul of the defensive line. You completely overhaul the secondary. You improve the toughness on offense. You focus on special teams. And I rattled all these things off really quickly. And we're going to kind of go through these things individually. But it's easy to forget and to take for granted how hard it is to change a few of those things, let alone all of those things in a few short years. And so when Jake and I were talking earlier, we were kind of thinking, I don't recall a team that has gone through this much change on and off the field. Coaching staff, players, culture, you name it. And you can think of a few teams where, like, okay, like when the Patriots got Tom Brady, like everything changed. Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, things changed. When the Chiefs go out and get Andy Reid, and they go from Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, all of a sudden things change. The Chargers, if you think about like an analogy, like they literally had to tear down the house and build it from scratch. And new coaching staff, new quarterback, and that's really exactly what we did. And Jake, kind of starting this off, let's say prior to Justin Herbert getting drafted, Phillip Rivers is moving, goes to Indy, bags are packed, Chargers are picking 7 overall. Did you ever think that the team, not even in terms of success, but just in terms of what this team looks and feels like from a culture and from us like believing and everything, like did you ever think the Chargers could get to this point where you are actually impressed and somewhat, I don't want to say fulfilled, but somewhat, there's a word I'm looking for, but you are in agreement with so many things that they're doing?
Moving the needle from X to Y, essentially.
We were stuck.
In such a short fashion.
Yes. Tires were spinning. Did you ever think we were going to get out of it, let alone get to this point where now we're arguably Super Bowl contenders?
No. And for a multitude of different reasons, obviously, let's go ahead and start with the quarterback scenario. And with any draft pick, when you move on with someone like Phillip Rivers, who had the legacy with this team that he had and a known commodity that you know what type of player he is, and then to go off and obviously you're taking a quarterback, top part of the round. And in this particular quarterback class, it was a very polarizing top 3 quarterback class. But as with all quarterbacks, it's not 100% that any of these guys are going to pan out. And Justin Herbert has come in and greatly exceeded expectations, had a tremendous rookie of the year season in 2020, had an even better sophomore jump for what he was able to do in Brandon Staley's offense. But again, even at that point, the draft pundits hate the term crapshoot. It's all about just making sure you're doing your homework. I mean, you can control the narrative by drafting players that can play football and do it well. But on top of this, Dan, and this is probably the one thing that maybe has switched the narrative completely, is Brandon Staley. Because not since the days of Marty Schottenheimer, when you had a combination of Marty Schottenheimer, Phillip Rivers, LaDainian Tomlinson, Antonio Gates, Sean Merriman, Sean Phillips, Donnie Edwards, guys who ruled both sides of the ball and had a collective mindset about what type of football they were going to do, how to win, and a person that could lead that locker room and have the same collective vision. The Chargers went through their Norv Turner days. The Chargers went through their Mike McCoy days. The Chargers went through their Anthony Lynn days. Nothing from a coaching perspective ever really seemed to replicate that. And we've been searching for it ever since 2006. Now you have Brandon Staley, comes in under the Vic Fangio system, learned underneath Sean McVay as a defensive coordinator for a season with the Rams. And just from the moment that you hear his first press conference, it's just like, whoa, this is something that we've never experienced before. And now when you hear him talking today about Justin Herbert's growth, his vision for the team. I tweeted about it from his interview from that he had on Rich Eisen show the other day, that when he went in to interview with Dean Spanos and Tom Telesco, he said, this is my vision for him. I want to create a system that we're going to develop and grow him in that system until the point comes where he becomes the system, essentially. And he talked about it. He said, all the great ones, the great quarterbacks in NFL history have literally become the system. Everybody believed that Tom Brady was a system quarterback because he played with Bill Belichick. Obviously, that's not the case. But that's the type of goals that Brandon Staley has for Justin Herbert as far as excelling and maximizing his potential. But even outside of Justin Herbert, let's just go through a short checklist of what he's had to do in this period of time in 2 years and turning this team around. You came in January of, what was that? That would have been 2021 at that point in time. You have to revamp your entire coaching staff. So you're putting a whole new coaching staff together. This, again, is at this point in time, this would be the 5th year that Justin Herbert was in a completely new coaching staff for him to develop, going all the way back to his time in Oregon. So offensive and defensive side of the ball, he has to revamp the coaching staff there. You have to go through free agency and the draft. And in that short period of time, you completely cleaned house and revamped your offensive line that performed much better than it did in 2020. And obviously he's continued to do that this season. And then look what he does this past offseason. With the most cap money that I can remember the Chargers having in a very long time, he knows what the weakness was of this team. Now you completely rehaul the interior and the defensive line. You go out and you trade for Khalil Mack. You pick up Austin Johnson. You pick up Sebastian Joseph Day. As Dan mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you go out and you acquire Kyle Van Noy in free agency. You get J.C. Jackson. I mean, you're putting all the pieces around, and then you add much needed depth pieces behind that in the draft. I mean, it may not have been the sexiest draft to some Chargers fans, and I'll tell you, even at first face value, I kind of had an issue with it past the number 1 pick. But you take a look at it now and you fully understand what it is that he's trying to do on both sides of the football. And in a short 2-year span like that, that is an enormous responsibility for a rookie head coach, essentially a guy who's only been coaching not even 2 full years yet. And for what he's done for this team in that period of time is phenomenal.
And it's something to be said, as much as a lot of the credit goes to Brandon Staley. You can't credit Brandon Staley without crediting Tom Telesco. He made the choice. Same with Dean Spanos. So for as much flack as Tom Telesco has been given, and some of it rightly so, in terms of the lack of success in the playoffs, the lack of getting to the playoffs and winning division titles and all of that, he is also who brought the thing that has made all of this change happen. And so, I mean, like, Jake, it's kind of wild, right? So we take it around the Wayback Machine. Chargers were known for, like, awful offensive line. They were known for horrendous special teams. They were known for terrible clock management. They were known for not being able to keep their own free agents. I mean, the list goes
cheap,
on and on
I
and
believe,
on and on.
was the word. Right?
Yep.
Cheap.
Yep. So, starts off, right? Chargers re-sign premier talent. Keenan, Allen, Bosa both get ridiculous deals. Okay, Justin Herbert then goes out, has an incredible Offensive Rookie of the Year campaign. The rest is history for him. Brandon Staley comes in. Whole new coaching staff. Whole new defensive scheme. And with that, like you mentioned, from the first press conference, there's this new kind of identity, culture in terms of like aggressiveness and grit and belief and kind of coming together as a family and getting to know people and being intelligent on and off the field, and not really having coaching being the reason you lose games, but actually being an advantage to you and your team. And so there's this new culture and identity that starts brewing, right? You talked about like the complete rebuild of the offensive line. Brings in Corey Linsley, arguably the best center in the NFL. Matt Feiler, Aboushi at the time. And these turned out to be incredible signings. And then right after that, you draft Rashawn Slater, you draft Asante Samuel Jr., and you all of a sudden have 2 fantastic draft picks. Your offensive line goes from a weakness to, other than the right tackle because of injuries to Balaga, becomes a strength. We talk about in-game improvements, right? Remember how many times we lost games because we saw stupid shit happen at the end of the half, at the end of the fourth quarter, 2-minute drills went to waste, couldn't get the field goal units on, punt teams getting blocked, like you name it. It was all happening. And now we're seeing coaching staffs that's like revolutionizing different things to do, whether it's the 4th and Staley's, whether it's making sure that you actually have the right guys on the field and being aggressive all the time. It's no longer a disadvantage for your team. So whether it's clock management, aggressiveness, the in-game improvements have now kind of checked off, right? Special teams was horrendous. We could not find a kicker to save our life. And then every time we let a kicker go, they became a Pro Bowler on whatever team they went to. Chargers are able to now draft. They're able to sign Dustin Hopkins. They see in-season adjustments. Wasn't working. Telesco, Staley go out and get Dustin Hopkins. They sign Andre Roberts. And both of those guys completely turn the page of our special teams. And weirdly, we're now like excited to watch special teams play and seeing punt returns, seeing field goals going through the uprights. We're not used to seeing that. And then, off the season ends, kind of brutal, that we just missed the playoff, but it was a winning season. Chargers went 9-8, just missed the playoffs, heartbreaking loss to the Raiders. Ugh. But still, Jake, like the team had a top 5 offense. Eckler had ridiculous numbers. Both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both had 1,000 yards. Justin Herbert, if the team would have won a few more games, was in like MVP contention until they kind of flailed out at the end of the season. So team's doing great, but it's still building. Okay. And then you kind of mentioned it, like the team just goes into high gear. They're saying, you know what? F it. We've got money to spend finally. And then people were saying, well, Chargers are cheap. Chargers don't spend their money. They're just going to keep it. And before the free agency even starts, breaking news, Khalil Mack to the Chargers for arguably just a 2nd-round pick. And time will tell. Aggressiveness, free agency, trades start happening. Okay. So already, this is something that Chargers fans, if you stop right there, going into the draft, Chargers trade for Khalil Mack, got some holes to fill, interior defensive line, secondary, whatever. Like, you're like, damn. But they didn't. And so, like, weirdly, and I can rattle off a list for an hour here of all the things that have happened this offseason. We don't need to go through all of them. But Jake, were there things this specific offseason? Like, what were the things that you were like, this is not the same old Chargers? Like, what specific things you're like, this is different?
I mean, I think it's kind of a microcosm of things, because this offseason, the Chargers had money to spend, which traditionally they don't have that much to spend. But it's not so much of them spending it, but it's who they're spending it on. And it's the type of people that you see Brandon Staley going for. Like the J.C. Jackson thing. And then when you see the final numbers and the cap hit that I ended up having against this year, compared to what you've seen other guys get since then, it blows my mind. The math doesn't make any sense. Getting Sebastian Joseph Day, who's familiar with Brandon Staley's system. Austin Johnson, who I think is going to be, hasn't been talked about enough how volatile I think he's going to be. And you pair that with a Khalil Mack and a Joey Bosa, that's your starting front four, essentially. Like, talk about a revamp. Talk about getting younger. I think that was one of the biggest things that I wanted to see from this team for a long time, was for them to get younger in the middle. And yes, Justin Jones was younger, but he didn't end up panning out. Too many injuries throughout his career. Chargers thought that was the better move to let him go. Linval Joseph was obviously north of 30, didn't have the production that he had in 2020 this past year, so the Chargers let him go. And then I thought I was forgetting one, but I apologies if I am.
Justin Jones.
I mentioned Justin Jones, but that's how you reshape. Just to start, that's how you reshape your defensive line. Not too bad. And Akeem Hicks is still out there, by the way, even though that was the one that we all thought was going to be the slam dunk, no-brainer type move. But he's still out there in free agency. And then the secondary, look what you do. Despite the fact that you gave Mike Davis a nice contract extension last year, despite what anybody feels about his play, that's totally your opinion. Despite the fact that you went out and you spent a second-round pick in the 2021 draft on Asante Samuel Jr., you got really aggressive to say, it's not good enough for us. And you go out and you get one of the best corners in the game in J.C. Jackson. And as I said, you reshape that defensive secondary. In Staley's terms, you make it multiple. And I think that's on top of what he did in the draft, is you're getting all these type of guys to be multiple different formations. Asante Samuel Jr. can play inside, outside. Bryce Callahan, the same thing. He was just recently signed. Is probably going to be regulated to the slot, but he can also play inside, outside. Great depth signing. And of course, I think this is his third stint with Brandon Staley as his head coach, once with the Broncos, once with the Bears, and now. So he's extremely familiar with the system. But much like it was for Justin Herbert the year prior, where you say, we want to put him in the best position to get us to a victory. Think about this. He's talked about Derwin James as the quarterback for this defense for so long now. And now look what you can do with all of these secondary additions, both through free agency and the draft, that you can allow Derwin James to do what has made him so good throughout college, throughout his rookie season. You can move him all over the field. Because of the Chargers' weaknesses in the secondary option, you literally had to pull back on Derwin and say, look, we got to have you play back here. And that's pretty much all we can do, because we don't have anybody back here who can help you out. So we have to have you back
help.
here. Now you can move him around the field. You can bring him up on the line on a blitz package. You can put him in the slot if you want to. You can have him cover too deep. I mean, you can pretty much do anything with him
without having to worry about someone screwing it up behind him, I think is the important part.
Exactly. Dan, JT Woods, despite what we may say of us lauding Kyle Hamilton and our Daxton Hill conversations, but in some people's opinion, JT Woods was the best center field safety in this entire draft. He's the type of guy that can give you flexibility with him and Nasir Adderley in the back and move Derwin around. That's a way that you can be creative, and that's what Staley is trying to do in this revamp. So it's not just on one side of the defense that he has done this.
Sure.
I mean, it's not just in one facet of the defense that he's done this either. He has completely transformed not just the defensive line, not just the middle, but the secondary as well. And it's impressive.
It's, we talked about like the shift in culture and identity. Think back to before Staley was here. Like the Chargers, in terms of like toughness, if they needed a 4th and 2, 3rd and 1, like how many times did we see run up the middle, get stuffed, or stupid play calling, you name it. And the Chargers on both sides of the ball. Then on defense, how many times was it 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, and you are just getting gashed over and over and over and
how about
over.
3rd and 22? I mean,
don't even start that.
It still didn't matter. It was basically third down was the Chargers' opponent's down, really was, because you just knew in your heart to say, well, 3rd and 45, they're going to figure out a way to convert this.
That's honestly 3rd and 45. That's like a great podcast name. 3rd and 45.
3rd and 45.
But okay, so like the shift in identity and like needing that like ruggedness and toughness that Brandon Staley talked about, like that fingerprints all over this team. Khalil Mack, Sebastian Joseph Day, as you mentioned, Austin Johnson, now Kyle Van Noy on defense. Also, JC Jackson, I think, brings a level of toughness. And then offensive wise, you already had the offensive line kind of starting and humming already. And then you add a Zion Johnson, you add an Isaiah Spiller, you add a Gerald Everett to kind of beef up your offensive line and kind of give you that mentality. You get a Jamari Sawyer to kind of improve that and get like the toughness that I think this team has been lacking. And the goal, it appears, is, Jake, you mentioned the word like multiple. The Chargers want to be a team where they don't have to rely on Justin Herbert to be this God, Avenger, Superman. Like, could he do it? Yes. But you should not be
to watch. But
you should not be seeing a quarterback throw for 50 touchdowns roughly and going 9-8. Like it's great, but like if you're doing that and your team is not the 1 seed or at least like winning your division, there's something wrong. And so the team has been wanting to become more balanced. And that has been something this team has been lacking for years. And I would argue probably since Schottenheimer, where this team can beat you in theory. We haven't seen it play out yet, but the goal is if you need to run to win, they should be able to do it. If you need to stop on 3rd down, you need to be able to stop the run, you should be able to do it. If you need to go through an air raid and shootout, you should be able to do it. If you need special teams, you should be able to do it. If you need tight end yard after the catch abilities, you should be able to do it. And people talk about, this team doesn't have speed. Like, sort of true. But, like, Guyton is plenty fast. DeAndre Carter, I think, is going to be used more than people recognize. And I think it's less about speed and more about...
It is about dropped balls.
That too. Last year was brutal. But, like, I think it's more just about efficiency. Like, how many times did we see the Patriots win Super Bowls with, like, Edelman and Welker and random receivers? Even Randy Moss, when he was playing there, wasn't like the fastest dude when he was there. That's not how they won. Like, Gronk doesn't have a 4.3 speed. Like, that's not how it goes. And I think that's what the Chargers are looking for. They want to be efficient on both sides of the ball and be balanced. And because of the cap room and actually spending it wisely, they were able to get Mike Williams on a team-friendly deal. Look at some of the other contracts now. They got J.C. Jackson, and now looking at that contract, that looks, you mentioned it, like that's Christmas came early. And Gerald Everett, I think, was a huge value pick. Like these things, I asked you like what specifics, but there's so many areas of this team that are just different. And you're seeing that now nationally being recognized and seeing him on, seeing Staley on Rich Eisen and seeing Justin Herbert everywhere, seeing Kyle Van Noy now being on this team as another leader. They're signing different types of guys than we're used to, than they have done. Like we've always seen kind of like that second tier, coupon Tom, if you will. And, the biggest signing would be like a Linval Joseph or a Chris Harris Jr., which at the time, we thought those were quality signings, but those were not blockbuster signings. And in 2 years, we're seeing box office stuff happen here in LA, which we should be. But did we expect that? Hell no.
No. But you need to now, especially after the way that the AFC West has transformed in one single offseason, and the most bonkers offseason that I can remember. You had to do it. So not only was it good to see a change like that from the Chargers just to be in contention, but now look at how valuable those moves are going to be when it comes to the AFC West just kicking the shit out of each other throughout the season.
It's true. So again, the goal of this is just to kind of provide perspective. Okay. And we all deserve and have the right to be critical of the team when need be. And there are plenty of things that this team can still improve. But I think it is important to sit back and recognize like how different the Los Angeles Chargers are in 2022 than the team was 3 years ago. And like that time goes by quickly.
Yeah.
But like Austin Eckler wasn't even part of San Diego. And like he's like one of like the veterans of this team. And him now being able to have, some assistance with an Isaiah Spiller and an offensive line that actually has one guy who's a Pro Bowler, let alone Pro Bowl / all pros in multiple positions. It's just, I know I'm the optimist, so this is speaking my language, but like, I think at some point you have to be able to think about like, you know what, like they've actually done a pretty damn good job. Say what you will about prior to Staley getting here and say what you will prior to Justin Herbert getting here. But since then, given the cards they were dealt with, like, I don't know how they could have done better without like sacrificing some of the things that they did. Like, it's been a miraculous kind of shift with this team and culture. And I think it's important for Chargers fans to kind of recognize that and to appreciate that as we get to training camp. Like, every time I was going to training camp last year, and this was just last year before this offseason, it was like, oh my gosh, like that's guy's an offensive lineman and he's really freaking good. And like that coach is doing something smart. And like there are so many things that were just different. Imagine what that's going to be like this training camp. Like, oh, Khalil Mack's over there. Like, oh, Kyle Van Noy's over there. Oh, J.C. Jackson's back there. Oh, Sebastian Joseph Day, that looks different. Zion Johnson's a little different. Like, there's so many things now. And for one offseason, Jake, like, I know you're the pessimist, but I got to hear it. From your perspective, grade their offseason in totality. Give it all of it.
Okay, look, as Dan said, this is strictly about perspective. Does this mean anything that we're saying is going to translate into win or loss record, predicting anything like that at this point in time? No, that's not what we're trying to do. Dan, I would be careful when you say the sentences, could they have done more? Be careful because I can think of one or two things that they could have done. And I'm sure a lot of people would probably agree because, you may have the people that come back and say, well, yeah, Dan, there's a lot more that they could have done.
No, but yes, they could have done more. But I think if they would have done more, it would have sacrificed other things.
Right. I get what you're saying, though. But it's just in a term of really, for Brandon Staley, a year and a half. He hasn't even gotten to minicamp yet for his second season as the Chargers head coach. And really, this is incredible. This is incredible. Normally, the stuff that we as bystanders, as fans, would think about to say, God, the Chargers really needed this, and this, and they only got one of them. I mean, there's not many boxes that you could say that Brandon Staley has not checked in 2 off seasons. There are some. There are some. There are some.
That's it.
Yes, there are some. I'm not saying that he's immaculate, but there are a good majority of boxes that he has checked in his year and a half, essentially now as a Chargers head coach. So, God, man, if we're grading this offseason in totality, I'll still be fair about it. Look, the Chargers had cap room to spend, and they did it. The Chargers had to revamp their entire defense, essentially, and they did it. You were bottom of the barrel in run defense. You were last in the league on third down defense. You had to fix that in a multitude of different ways. Brandon Staley has done that, I think, in my opinion. Obviously, we'll see what happens when it comes to playing time. But as far as making the moves to improve in a number of different ways, he's done that. You're still adding protection for Justin Herbert as you realize how vital that is. And not just from a starting offensive line, whatever combination that may look like by the time September rolls around, we don't know. But you look at the depth behind your starting offensive line now all of a sudden and say, hey, that's not bad. The drop-off ain't that far anymore, when normally we would be saying, oh, God, oh, God, look out. Who's down now? Who's going to replace him? I didn't even know that dude was on the roster. Who is he? You're not asking yourself those questions anymore. And then I think just the mentality that he has put together, soup to nuts, coaching staff all the way down, the aggressiveness, I think he's been in Tom Telesco's ear when it has come about some of these decisions. And I think it's even helped Tom Telesco even change his perspective a little bit as well. I was the one that said it. Tom Telesco had to have a slam dunk offseason in order to continue being the Chargers GM moving forward. If you just took free agency, I'd say that that's a win. On top of that, you get Zion Johnson at 17th overall. You still continue to add depth pieces. I know it's not the most immaculate draft. I'm not calling it that by no means. But in a single offseason, you did this, and this. He knew what he had to do. He did it. Again, not immaculate, but he got it as best as he could. And same with Brandon Staley. So overall, offseason grade, I won't go as far as to give him an A. But I'll give him a B. I'll give him a B plus with everything.
How about this? If it was a slam dunk contest in the NBA, what would be the signpost you're putting up for the dunk?
Oh, hey, that was like a good. I'd give it an 8. I would.
Okay.
I would.
Fair.
And again, that grade has drastically shifted in the last 3 days, given what the Chargers got after the draft. Because trust me, like everybody else out there, I had questions. How are we missing this piece or this piece? And then this week has been pretty good to the Chargers.
And the fact that we're sitting here like nitpicking an 8 out of 10, which I think we're being tough graders, 8 out of 10. We'll just go with that. If this was an 8 out of 10, what the hell were the last 5-10 year off seasons?
-2.
It's if we're talking temperature, we went from Arizona heat now to New England
Antarctica. What's the temp in Antarctica? I don't know. But
whatever it is, the Chargers temperature is lower.
Yeah.
Look, that was kind of it for this episode. Just want to go through how much we've seen shift in this team and to just enjoy it. And, we're all part of this process. We're all in this together. But I think it is important to sometimes, and even you, Jake, I think it's important to sometimes be grateful for what they have done. Sure. Can things have been improved in other ways? Yes. But in totality, like you said, a shit ton to be grateful for, to be excited about as we go into this 2022 Charger season.
Yeah. You're moving the needle when you're changing my attitude a little bit. So,
and that's where we are. Jake, anything else we want to tell the great Chargers fans before we head out of here?
Dan, I think you have an announcement for later on this month, but as Dan's going to allude to here in a second, obviously with Zion Johnson coming on the show earlier this week, which was an absolute treat. It's going to be a big May for us, not just with obviously rookie mini camps getting underway and training camp after that, which Dan and I plan on attending. So we will be out there. So definitely hope you guys all come out as well. But this is going to be a big month for the Chargers Unleashed. Number of different guests that we're going to be on the show. Dan, I can't remember the timetable in which we are going to be doing our next giveaway, but it's a damn good giveaway, trust me. And so you're going to want to get onto that when we announce it. And then, Dan, please wrap up my announcements with your announcement.
Honestly, I kind of like the way you teased it. I might just leave it at that. We have we talked about, giveaways. We talked about special guests. We talked about mini camps.
Tease your announcement as teasy as you can.
All right. So in terms of guest appearances you could have on the show, or in terms of collaborations that you might be doing with other networks or groups, or
that was the one I was alluding to.
Yep. You could be, doing things with signings. You could be doing things that you've never done before that is allowing you to kind of go into this next frontier as a podcast / LA Football Network. You mentioned it's going to be a big month. It's going to be a big off season. And again, we're not going to spoil too much, but just be on the lookout. You'll be seeing things come as soon as next week after this episode drops. And then probably, week after that, week after that, week after that, week after that. It's going to be a wild ride. I'm so excited to be able to do it alongside you, Jake Hefner, and all of the listeners, the viewers who are here with us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Jake, it's going to be crazy this offseason as we continue on into preseason. Again, if you do not follow Jake, his backwards hat and his fresh haircut at Jake T. Hefner, you can follow myself at Chargers Homer. LAC_Unleash is where you can get us on Twitter. Again, on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, follow us everywhere. We're on Instagram as well. Have a great weekend. Enjoy this feeling, Chargers fans. Bryce Callahan, Kyle Van Noy, Zion Johnson. It's been a damn good week. And we'll talk to you next time as we get into some of the crazy of Chargers Unleashed.